Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mystery Silence Theater, where Hollywood's depiction of silencers gets put to the test. In our first two episodes, we asked you to let us know what shows and movies you wanted us to review next, and your responses were fantastic. So today, by popular demand, we're going to dive into my favorite new show, a show that was actually written by a friend of ours, former Navy SEAL Jack Carr. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Today's episode, we're watching The Terminal List. Now, full disclosure before we jump in, Jack's been a friend of mine for the better part of a decade. 5 or 6 years ago, he actually saved one of our friends' lives at SHOT Show, so for more reasons than one, we're all forever in his debt. He's one of the most down-to-earth and caring people that I've ever met, but you'd be a fool to mistake his kindness for weakness. The dude is an absolute lion. Jack sent me a copy of The Terminal List the day it was published, and I've been hooked ever since. I've read all 5 of his books, watched the show the day it came out, and I'm even wearing Jack's custom Ball and Buck shirt with his Tomahawk logos and Long Live the Brotherhood sewn in. All that being said, I'm not going to let my friendship with Jack or my affinity for the books and the show impact my judgment of the way they portray suppressors in the series. So let's dive in. So spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the show, A, you should, and B, you should stop watching this because we're going to be spoiling quite a bit of it. Granted, we're starting out in the first 7 minutes of the show, so like you're going to get there pretty quick, but we're going to finish up going through every time that a suppressor is used in a meaningful way in the series. So you're going to see a lot of stuff that if you're not finished, you're not going to want to see.
We keep it quiet, in and out. No one's going to even know we're there.
So you see these guys walking in on the beach, keeping it quiet. Looks like they've got some rugged suppressors on there. Those are great cans. Love shooting those things. It's a pretty cool shot of the can. These guys all just coming out of the water for their raid in Syria in the show. It's a great intro, man. I love it.
Bravo platoon has just touched down, as you know. Cox has given us the option to stand down and hand this off as part of the turnover. I told him that we did not come here to coast. This motherfucker is ours. We are Alpha.
We're going to have to beep that out. So one of the cool things about this show is that a lot of the guys who are playing the operators are actual former operators, just like Jack. Some of the guys served with him. And I think that's just a really neat way to do it, right? Like, they've got the movements down, obviously, because they've done it in theater overseas for years. And I really love the way that these sorts of things kind of come out when you have actual, door kickers and shooters playing these guys, right? Like, there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than putting people that don't know anything about guns, don't know how to handle it, don't know how to move.
Knock, knock.
To portray these guys, I think it's a really cool move on their part to include so many of these former SEALs in the cast. So they're about to get in this shootout. Nailing it, man. So far, so good.
We've got heavy contact rear. They need backup. Chief, I'm putting a fire team together and moving to the crow's position. Roger that. Move it. Watch your back.
Yeah, so you can hear the difference between the RPK and the AK fire, which is unsuppressed, and the suppressed M4s that they're running. But the sound of the suppressed M4s is still loud. I dig it, man. They're doing a really good job with this. It's very obvious that they've got people that understand and know the way that suppressors work on a firearm. And it looks like they really cared about portraying it in an accurate way, which, man, rock on, dude. Yeah, man, there's tons of great shots of them shooting with these suppressed rifles, and I mean, frankly, they're just spot on, dude. It really sounds like what it sounds like to shoot a suppressed AR, which, by the way, is not silent. And I know that's something that Jack likes to touch on in his books, which I think is really cool and I very much appreciate. But he's one of the few authors that I've ever read that like really goes out of his way to explain, like, yeah, he puts a suppressor on it. It reduces the noise of the gunshot, but it does not eliminate it. And for us, I mean, again, my job is predicated on debunking the myths and misconceptions that largely come out of Hollywood, right? Like, without James Bond and kind of the laser beams that we call it, I don't know that I would have a job, right? Granted, suppressors have been regulated since before the movies and stuff, so maybe I would, but I think it's likely that without all that stuff, these things could have potentially gotten taken out before. But regardless, I'm appreciative of the fact that I do have a job. I love what I do, and I also love it that Jack isn't afraid to buck the system. He's been getting a lot of heat from the critics who are saying that it's not woke enough. And from my perspective, at least through the Suppressor lens, man, like, you're crushing it, dude. Like everything else, you're crushing it. So here's another thing that I really appreciate about it. You can see the muzzle flash even with the Suppressor. So like, that's a bit of a misnomer that people think that like it's going to completely eliminate the muzzle flash. Like, it really does mitigate it. Because, I mean, if you think about it, the way that a gun works, right? Like, you have a small explosion that propels a projectile, a bullet, through a barrel and out of the muzzle. And when that propellant, all the gunpowder and whatnot that's being used to ignite that charge, hits the open air, it literally is a fireball. So without things like, a flash suppressor or a suppressor, on the end of that, that's just going to create something that's very easy to see as it hits the open air. Flash suppressors and suppressors themselves mitigate that, but just like the noise, they don't fully, completely eliminate it. And I think it's pretty cool that they're showing that in this series as well, something a little bit outside of the norm with just the noise angle of it. So, I mean, these guys really dug into the details, and Jack, I'm sure, was a huge part of that, wanting to make sure that, hey, we're portraying these as they are, not as people think that they are. And for that, dude, like, man, love it. Man, so I've never been in combat, but I think it's really cool how they've captured kind of, the chaos of the moment. Even with all these Rangers that come in with the QRF, they're all shooting suppressed, but it's loud. There's tons of chaos and a whole lot of things going on. They just really did a great job capturing that, man. So this is the next time that we see a suppressor being used in the series. This is episode 2 as Reese is breaking into the naval NCIS officer that killed his friend. Here he is. He's got a suppressed 45, it looks like. Trying to see what kind of can that is. Man, it's so dark, it's really hard to see what kind of kit they've got. But I think it opens up here in just a little bit when they turn the light on. It looks like another rugged can. Again, it's hard to see in the dark, but I believe that's another can from Rugged. Maybe their Oculus, which is also a fantastic suppressor. Honestly, everything that Rugged makes, I really love. They do a cool job with the design features. Their sound suppression is fantastic. Ooh, you done messed up! All right, so that's the only time that he actually pulls the trigger with a suppressed handgun in this episode. And, like, for me, it kind of falls somewhere in between, like, the James Bond laser beam and what it actually sounds like. 45 caliber, unsuppressed. .45 caliber suppressed. It's not completely off, but it's definitely not as spot on as it was when they were in the raid in Syria. So a little bit of a mixed bag on that. This is obviously meant to be more of kind of a clandestine operation for Reese. So, like, I understand wanting to show it in that vein. To fit kind of the plot line. A little bit of a laser beam element to it, though, so it's not completely accurate. So there's a really cool Easter egg in the show. When Reese is at the restaurant with the reporter and they're talking about stuff, you actually see Jack, the author of the books, walk by. And if you blink, you'll miss it, but here he goes. You can see him in the reflection from the window. That was Jack. It's funny because, like, this character seems to be based on a lot of Jack's actual experiences as a Navy SEAL, where he's kind of going one-on-one with himself. So I really thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, so that's Jack, man. I just thought that was so cool. When I saw that, I was just like, dude, the only thing that's off about this is he wouldn't have missed in real life. But obviously, it'd been pretty bad if he'd killed the main protagonist in the show that quickly himself. So definitely understand where it's going from. But who knew you were such a good actor, bud? That was awesome. All right, so the next time that we see a suppressor in the series is in episode 5. Reese is posted up outside of the subway station, and he sees one of the nefarious operators going in to try and kill the reporter and the scientist. And we can see him right there screwing on a little can, a tiny little can, like a single baffle, basically expansion chamber. Gemtech made something like this called the pillbox because it was about the size of a pillbox. And yeah, these were a real thing, man. It's kind of cool. It takes a little bit of the bite out of it, but it's still super loud, right? Like they're pretty ineffective as an actual suppressor. But if concealment is your issue and you just want to take a little bit away from the actual noise, it's kind of a cool way to do it. I don't know how many people actually use these things, whether or not, clandestine operators ever actually used them, but it was a cool way to integrate suppressors into the show. Let's see how it gets used. Oh, there he goes. That's a bad guy. She sees him.
Did you bring your phone?
He's identified.
Left it in the car, like you said.
Leave it at the office. Come on, we gotta go. We gotta go.
Smart guy. Not so smart in this situation. Okay, so that was a total laser beam, right? Like that had to have been a suppressed gunshot. Yep, there he goes. We can see it. Pretty big can. Yeah. So far, nailing it on the rifles and laser beams on the handguns. That's been kind of the consistent theme so far. You done messed up, bro. Did not see that coming. Good on her. In this case, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good girl with a gun. And hats off to her, man. She handled her business. Whoops! All right, let's watch that again and see how that sounded. All right, so that's not so bad, man. That was definitely not a laser beam. Here goes with the suppressed handgun with the little pillbox can on it.
Gotta move. Move. Come on.
That was a really cool scene. And frankly, like, maybe it would have been a little bit louder, but like for all intents and purposes in this, you got a lot of other environmental factors going on with that bus passing by and everything. I thought they did a pretty good job. So that's the most accurate portrayal of a suppressed handgun that they've shown so far. Right on, dude. All right, so here we are in the final episode of the series. It's the raid on the Secretary of Defense's house. You've got an HRT team stacking up. She's got all sorts of security around, and you've got James Reese.
Man, we need to move you now.
Okay.
Going in to do his thing, and his buddy doing Overwatch with that Barrett 50 cal.
Rise up. Careful.
Moving.
So here he goes. Yep. Still nailing it with that sound of the M4. Again, I love the details, man. A little bit of muzzle flash still happening when you're shooting with a suppressed rifle, especially in the dark. It makes it noticeable, but significantly less than the muzzle flash of an unsuppressed firearm that he's up against.
Clear.
Sounds good. Definitely not a laser beam. Man, that was a pretty awesome transition to his non-dominant hand. It's pretty cool seeing Chris doing this, man. He had his first appearance as a SEAL in Zero Dark 30, which is one that we're going to do here coming up. But man, you can tell that he's put in the time and the work into the shooting and the moving and the weapons manipulation. I really love seeing this. All right, that was like a little bit of a laser beam in there. But still, like, all in all, for the M4 stuff, he's doing a really good job with this. So that was it. That's all that we see when it comes to cans in the terminal list. From my perspective, I think that there's kind of two things that are pretty noticeable. First off, with the M4s, they did a really good job of showing not just the sound mitigation, but the flash mitigation, but that there is still an actually audible sound and some visible flash, even when you are using a suppressor. Again, it's not as loud and it's not as bright as without a suppressor, obviously, but those do still exist. I thought they nailed it on that for the most part, with an errant little laser beam here and there for dramatic effect. On the handgun side, I thought it was cool that they showed, everything from suppressed 45, that suppressed 1911, and I think a suppressed Glock that the guy was using in the subway with your traditional suppressors. I thought it was cool too that they integrated the pillbox. That little mini suppressor that Gemtech made. I don't know if that one was a Gemtech or not, but I thought that was pretty neat. And that one sounded pretty accurate, right? Like it's still going to be pretty loud, especially with a can that's only a single baffle, really just an expansion chamber. With the other handgun stuff, that waded into the laser beam territory. So it's kind of hard to rate this, right? Because on the one hand, they did so good with the M4s. On the other hand, they were a little bit Hollywood with the handgun stuff, at least in my opinion. So I mean, all that said, look, I think based on our scale, which goes from 0 to 10, 0 being complete Hollywood and 10 being, man, you just nailed it. Complete bullseye. Everything about this was accurate, from the way that you put them on, the way that you use them, the way that they sound. I think for the M4s, I probably give this like a 9.1. For the handguns, look, I mean, the normal handgun stuff, I'd probably give that like a 4.2. With the pillbox, I'm going to up that rating to about a 6.1, maybe 6.2. So I think all in all, I'm going to give this 2 different ratings. We'll say on the M4, we're sticking with 9.1 on all the rifle platforms in here. And with the handguns, we're going to go 5.2. That meets it in the middle. They get a lot of the stuff right, but they're still throwing in the laser beams a little bit. Jack, love you, brother. Love the show. Love the series. It was one of my favorite that I've seen in a long time. Can't wait to read your 6th book. Can't wait to see season 2 when it comes out. You did a fantastic job. Thanks for keeping it real, man. Hopefully next season we can get you on and we can talk through some of this stuff and see what some of your perspective on all of this. But anyways, kudos for a great book series. Kudos for a great show. We had a ton of fun watching it. Y'all should watch it too. Check out The Terminal List on Amazon Prime.